last two sections, we customized the way in which the print function represented our deck of cards and an individual card as well. So that kind of takes care of this print cards functionality right here. We're now going to move on to this shuffle function. You'll notice that anytime we print out our list of cards right here, they all appear to be in order. So ace, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then starting over ace, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when we first create our deck of cards, they're all created in order. Well, definitely a lot of card games out there are all based on chance, and so we definitely need to have the ability to shuffle the cards in the deck or to randomize their order. Now, we certainly could write a little bit of logic by hand to customize this shuffling, but instead we're going to rely upon a standard library function to automatically shuffle the list of cards for us. So in this section, we're going to be focused not so much on how we shuffle cards per se, but instead we're going to focus on looking up some of the standard documentation in the Dart API and get a better idea of how to read the documentation and use a lot of built-in functionality that is included with the Dart language. To get started, we're going to pull up the official Dart API documentation. So inside of a new tab in my browser, I'm going to navigate to api.dartlang.org. Now at the time of this video, Dart is still rolling out version 2, and version 2 is what we're using throughout this course of Dart. When we go to api.dartlang.org, at present, I see a page that looks like this right here, and this is the documentation for Dart version 1.2.4. But like I said, we are using Dart 2 throughout this course. So if you see this page, you'll want to find this link right here and go to the version 2 documentation. So if you see a page that looks like this when you go to api.dartlang.org, that's good. This is the version 2 documentation. So once we're here, you'll see on the left-hand side a couple of different sections. These are all portions or modules in the Dart standard library. If you've ever worked with JavaScript before, JavaScript is known as a language that has a rather weak standard library. In other words, there's not a lot of built-in functionality in a lot of the different objects that you work with. And a lot of the time, we end up having to write a lot of code from scratch to implement some very basic operations. Very much unlike JavaScript, Dart has a very strong standard library. So in Dart, whenever you make use of it, there's a tremendous amount of pre-generated code, or I shouldn't say pre-generated, but there's a lot of included code that we get for free just by using Dart. And it means that we can lean on the standard library a little bit to take care of many standard operations that we might otherwise have to write up by hand if we were making use of something like JavaScript. So what we're looking for in particular here is the core module. I'm going to click on core on the left-hand side, and then you'll notice on the right-hand side we get a listing of different classes. So these are all classes that are included in the core library of Dart. If you scroll down a little bit on the right-hand side, you'll find a class called list. So when you and I make our list of cards right now, we are creating an instance of a list. So if we look at the documentation for list, we can find a whole bunch of documentation about all the built-in functionality that comes whenever we create a list. So in particular, we can scroll down a little bit. You'll find a list of all the different ways to create a list. You'll find a list of all the different properties that belong to the list. And then you'll see all the different methods that we get for free as well. We're going to come back to this documentation quite a bit, but in this case, we're going to scroll down right now just a little bit and go directly to the function we're going to use. All right, here we go. So right here is a function or a method called shuffle. So anytime you create a list in Dart, you automatically get access to this shuffle method right here. So if we take our card list or our list of cards that exists inside of our deck, so like this thing right here, and we just call shuffle on it, it will automatically randomize the order of all the elements within that list and essentially accomplish what you and I are trying to do. So let's give this a shot. I'm going to flip back over to Dartpad, and I'm going to define a new method on my deck class. So underneath toString, I'm going to add a new method called shuffle. And then inside of here, all we're going to do is call cards.shuffle. So cards.shuffle. Cards is a reference to the list that belongs to our instance of the class. And then on that list object, we're going to call the shuffle method. which is going to automatically randomize all the elements within that list. Okay, so let's now try this out. Up inside the main function, after we create the deck, but before we print it, I'm going to call deck.shuffle. So this will invoke the shuffle method on our instance of the deck class, which in turn is going to call the shuffle method on our cards list. We then print out the deck of cards, and we should see them all randomized in order. So I'll click on Run, and then you'll notice that I now have 5 of diamonds, 4 of diamonds, 3 of spades, 5 of clubs. Clearly the list right here has been randomized. Okay, so in this section we started looking at the list documentation that is included with Dart. Like I said, we're going to be coming back to this documentation many times throughout this course and getting a better idea of how the standard library works, because you're going to be using the standard library quite a bit in just about every Dart application that you create, much more so than if you're coming from a background in a language like, say, JavaScript. Okay, so let's take a quick pause right here, and we'll continue in the next section.